Assalamu alaikum, I'm Aisha and you're watching Samaa News. Here are today's headlines. US President Donald Trump has announced that he has agreed to a 2-week ceasefire with Iran. The decision follows diplomatic engagement led by Islamabad, who urged Washington to allow more time for negotiations. Trump said the ceasefire is contingent upon Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz. In a post on Truth Social, the US president stated that he will suspend planned military strikes against Iran for 2 weeks based on conversations with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir, calling it a double-sided ceasefire. After Trump, Iran's Supreme National Security Council and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi also announced that the country has agreed to a 2-week ceasefire. They said the ceasefire is contingent on safe reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, coordinated with Iran's armed forces. Iran submitted a 10-point proposal to the US through Pakistan, which included commitment to non-aggression by the US, continuation of Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz, acceptance of Iran's uranium enrichment program, lifting of all primary sanctions imposed by successive US administrations, and withdrawal of US combat forces from the region. The Iranian Security Council described the acceptance of the proposal as a historic victory.
Meanwhile, President Trump has said that the United States will work closely with Iran following what he described as a regime change, as both sides move toward talks on tariffs and sanctions relief. He also warned that any country supplying weapons to Iran would face a 50% tariff on exports to the United States. Trump also said there would be no uranium enrichment, adding that many points in the U.S. proposal have already been agreed. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has said that US and Iranian delegations will visit Pakistan on Friday for talks aimed at a peaceful settlement to the conflict. In an address to the federal cabinet, Shehbaz called the truce a first step toward lasting peace, as both sides signal willingness to engage.
Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, on his part as a mediator, announced that both the United States and Iran have agreed to an immediate global ceasefire following Pakistan's diplomatic intervention. In a post on X, Shehbaz Sharif confirmed that the ceasefire is effective immediately and extends to all areas of conflict, including Lebanon and other regions. He invited delegations from both countries to Islamabad on Friday, April 10th, to negotiate a conclusive agreement aimed at settling all disputes and ensuring long-term peace and stability. He hoped the Islamabad talks succeed in achieving sustainable peace with more good news in coming days.
The White House has confirmed that President Donald Trump is dispatching a high-level negotiating team to Pakistan, led by Vice President JD Vance, for talks with Iran. Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said the first round of negotiations will take place on Saturday. US envoy Steve Witkoff and senior advisor Jared Kushner are also part of the delegation as diplomatic efforts gather pace. Meanwhile, Vice President Vance says a deal to end the conflict is possible if Iran negotiates in good faith. Speaking during a visit to Hungary, he said President Trump has directed the negotiating team to work toward an agreement.
Iranian media has said that Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bakir Kalibaf is to head the Iranian negotiating team for talks in Islamabad with US Vice President JD Vance. Iran's Supreme Security Council said the negotiations would begin on Friday. Kalibaf, long seen as a protege of late Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and a confidant of his son Mujtaba, who has succeeded to the position of Supreme Leader, has been a leading voice of defiance against Israel and the United States.
President Trump later said talks on the Iran crisis will be held behind closed doors, insisting only one set of key points is acceptable to the United States. In a social media post, he said those terms form the basis of the ceasefire, but gave no further details. Trump also said negotiations are expected to move quickly, while also threatening a federal probe over what he called leaked correspondence.
Trump also declared a total and complete victory following a 2-week ceasefire agreement with Iran. Speaking to AFP in a brief call, the US president insisted that Iran's remaining nuclear material would be taken care of under any peace deal. Trump further suggested that China may have played a role in pushing Iran toward negotiation, when asked whether Beijing had encouraged Tehran to agree to a truce. A spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in Washington told CNN that China had been working to promote a ceasefire since the conflict began.
On the other hand, US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says Washington has achieved a decisive military victory over Iran, claiming Tehran's missile program has been functionally destroyed. Speaking alongside Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dan Kane, he said US objectives have been met, but described the ceasefire as a pause with forces ready to resume combat. He also said that the Strait of Hormuz is now open and that American forces will remain in the region to ensure Iran complies with the ceasefire. He said Washington is not going anywhere and expects Tehran to come to the table and make a deal. On the other hand, Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel remains ready to confront Iran, despite a truce between Washington and Tehran. In a televised statement, he said Israel still has objectives to complete and would achieve them either through agreement or renewed fighting. He added that forces are prepared to return to combat at any moment, calling the truce a step, not the end of the campaign.
Moreover, Israel has said that it also supports US President Donald Trump's decision to suspend strikes against Iran for 2 weeks, but said the ceasefire does not include Lebanon. Benjamin Netanyahu's office said Israel backed the US move, provided Tehran immediately opens the straits and stops attacks against the United States, Israel, and countries in the region. Israel also said it supports US efforts to ensure Iran no longer poses a nuclear, missile, or terror threat to US, Israel, and Iran's Arab neighbors. However, Lebanon's Hezbollah has halted fire on northern Israel and on Israeli troops in Lebanon as part of a 2-week US-Iran ceasefire. But a lawmaker from the Iran-aligned group said Israel must also adhere to the truce, or it would collapse. The Israeli military said it was continuing its operations against Hezbollah there, and that the battle in Lebanon continues. 3 Lebanese sources said the group is likely to issue a statement outlining its formal position on the ceasefire and on Netanyahu's assertion that Lebanon is not included. On the other hand, China has hosted key talks between Pakistan and Afghanistan aimed at easing tensions and finding a long-term solution to their ongoing disputes. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said both countries agreed not to take actions that could complicate or escalate the situation. She said Pakistan and Afghanistan agreed to explore a comprehensive solution to the conflict that erupted between the two countries last October. The agreement came during peace talks held in Urumqi, where both sides focused on addressing key issues and identifying possible measures to reduce tensions. And oil has fallen below $100 per barrel after US President Donald Trump said he agreed to a 2-week ceasefire with Iran that was subject to the immediate and safe reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Brent futures fell $14.51, or 13.3%, to $94.76 a barrel, while WTI slid $17.16, or 15.2%, to $95.79 a barrel. That's all for now. For more updates, visit www.samaa.tv. Thank you for watching Samaa News.